Auctioneer breaks the quiet. Lot number 12, male, age 25. No visible scars. Strong arms, obedient nature. We'll start the bidding at $800. At first, it feels like a scene from a movie, but it's not. This was real. This happened. And what struck me as I began researching this was the coldness. What I thought I knew about slavery was just the surface. I didn't realize that behind the violence was a system, and the more I read, the more I began to understand. This wasn't cruelty, this was management. Let's explore this together. Let's find out how enslaved people were priced. When I imagined slavery, I used to think of whips, chains, and cotton fields. But I never thought about ledgers and calculations. What surprised me most was how enslavers treated their plantations, not just as farms, but as businesses. And their records, shockingly detailed. They tracked each enslaved person as an asset. Name, age, skill level, physical condition, and value. All written down in rows and columns. And they didn't stop there. They updated these values regularly, in some cases, every year. One example comes from an 1854 ledger in Louisiana. It lists an enslaved woman named Mary, age 30, valued at $600. Next to her name, her two children, Henry, age 6, valued at $150, and Sarah, age 2, valued at $75. Seeing this shook me, not because it was new, but because it was precise. Enslaved people weren't just labor, they were capital, managed, evaluated, and monetized. The more I read, the more familiar it felt, as if I was reading the early drafts of modern business spreadsheets. As I kept going, I started to ask a simple but brutal question. How exactly were prices set? What made one person worth $800 and another just $100? The answer I found was disturbingly methodical. The most obvious factor was age. Prime labor age, usually between 18 and 35, brought the highest prices. Younger children, often valued as long-term investments. Infants might be listed for $25 or $50, while a healthy teenager could fetch hundreds. Then came gender. Men were often priced higher for physical labor, but women had a different value logic. In many records, women of childbearing age were valued not just for their work, but for their ability to bear children. Children who, under slavery, were automatically the property of the owner. Pure profit. Reproduction wasn't just a biological fact, it was an economic strategy. Skill also changed everything. A skilled carpenter or blacksmith could double or even triple in value. Health and temperament mattered too. Ledger entries used words like sound, lame, crippled, or mulish. They were pricing signals. Enslaved people were displayed on platforms, paraded in front of buyers, inspected like livestock. Muscles were squeezed, teeth checked, backs examined for scars, all in full public view. There were even marketing strategies. Sellers dressed enslaved people in clean clothes, made them smile, and fed them better in the days before sale to drive the price up. It's horrifying, and yet familiar, because some of the language and practices resembled modern business. So many of the techniques used on plantations mirror the early tools of modern business management. Plantation owners weren't just keeping records, they were calculating value, forecasting labor output, and tracking productivity over time. In some ledgers, enslaved people were assigned estimated lifespans and expected years of useful labor. If someone was injured, their value was written down. If a child was born, the owner would log it as a future gain. They calculated return on investment. Literally, how much cotton can I expect this man to pick over the next 10 years? How many children might this woman bear? It's disturbing, but familiar, because in some ways, this was the prototype of what we now call HR. how much of this system of accounting, control, and labor management survived into the present? The answer is more than I expected. In the 1800s, enslavers pioneered techniques that would later become common in factories and corporations. They tracked output per person. They created productivity targets. They used data to make decisions about discipline, investment, and even replacement. Fast forward to today. Businesses still monitor performance. Workers are still measured, timed, and sometimes reduced to metrics. Of course, it's not the same. But the logic, the obsession with efficiency and return, feels similar. That's not to say all modern business is rooted in slavery, but part of it is. Part of the mindset, the structure, the language of assets and human resources. Reading Rosenthal's book helped me connect dots I didn't even know existed. She doesn't just document the past, she shows how those accounting methods laid the groundwork for managerial capitalism. It made me realize that we're not just learning history, we're standing on it. Those who do not think that employment is systemic slavery are either blind or employed. Nassim Nicholas Taleb.